Let us continue to the news this week. I'll share my screen. Oh, actually, before everything else, can you see this? Can you see this, D? Can you see that on your phone?
Oh, don't show that utter filth on stream, eh? There are children. There are children watching. For God's sake.
Before we start, and there's been a lot of idle chatter. Let's face it. Before we start, we must. There are two ceremonies I want to do before we get going, and the first is that we must have a moment to reflect on the fact that we've been in lockdown for a year. And this is a genuine thing that has been going on all around the UK, isn't it? Led by Downing Street.
Yeah, 15 days to slow the spread, as they say in America.
We have been in lockdown since 23rd of March last year. It started. And what are they talking about? A day of reflection. A day of...
God.
I want to go around the panel, okay? You can have a little moment to think if you want. And I don't mind about dead air. If you want to take time to reflect and pause, take that time. Nobody will mind. And I want you to give me some reflections of a year living in lockdown. And I will start with you, Shinobi.
Well, what could you say, isn't it? I mean, it was a temporary measure to flatten the curve. And 12 months later, we're still at it. And everyone's just accepted it. That's a surprising thing. Reflections, it's just a waste of time. I could understand originally why they panicked because of the projections that were coming out of some London university, wasn't it? Now, the numbers scared them, didn't they? That's fine, right? It was an unknown. They didn't know what was happening. But 12 months down the road, they're just taking a piss now, aren't they?
Froggy, your reflections, please.
The only time I saw people was at work. So I've kind of just been sat here getting up and sitting in front of a computer screen and trying not to drink too much or partake in anything else. I don't know, pretty much everything else I'd say on this should be fed posting, I guess.
Owain, reflections.
I think often quite a bit about the kind of the social impact on it all. Like, say, for example, I know me and probably many in the chat have lost a year of their youth to this nonsense when we are the least vulnerable, and we could have probably likely caught the virus and survived with relatively easily. I understand, you're protected, vulnerable, and all that. But the thing is, I've lost a year of my youth. I'm now a year behind, and so is everyone. Anyone in education has lost a year of that, and they got to do more. My generation behind are already anxious, depressed, and this is only exacerbating that. And I've seen as well, like, towns become just desolate. When you see on the news, they're really underselling the amount of damage this has done to people's livelihoods and to people's mental state. There'll be so many more shut-ins. You wonder now, what will it be like to even go to a bar or club now properly? Will people like kind of hesitate to go near each other now, and you worry as well that someone's going to try and push this for like every flu season. We don't know the effects of what's going to happen, really. I don't know.
Reflections.
Well, I think this is the perfect music to reflect on the situation that we've been under. People, you were talking about numbers. I'll turn it off because it's making me want to die. People talking about numbers. There are no numbers. I mean, there is no point in arguing or trying to figure out the numbers because the numbers are all ostensibly untrustworthy. We have no idea how any country or even any city or even any hospital, any agency, we have no idea how they collected numbers, what the numbers mean, what those statistics meant, how they counted things. We have no idea the reliability of tests. We have no idea the motivations behind any of the scientific institutions that have been publishing any papers on this. The numbers are completely meaningless. So there's no point in even referring to them. There is no point in referring to anything that any governmental agency says, any sort of pharmaceutical company, any scientific journal. As far as I'm concerned, everything and everyone in every organization is completely compromised by this. And so any scientific inquiry into this, if ever, will only be trustworthy far in the future when the people who have caused this situation are all out of power and gone, and hopefully have passed on from history. And so, I don't think we're ever going to know the truth of this situation. I mean, I think that as far as I can tell, obviously something has happened. There is some, there was a novel coronavirus. It did certainly affect certain populations and certain types of people and certain demographics. But beyond that, I have no idea. I do know that it was basically a test. It was a test to see what the populations of the world would put up with, what level of tyranny, what level of ludicrous social control, what level of gaslighting and lies that the populations of the world would be willing to put up with. And as far as I'm concerned, almost everyone failed that test. We failed it massively. We have shown that we are completely manipulatable, that we will not do anything, even if it means harm, that we're being harmed, that our families are being harmed, that our children are being harmed, that our institutions are being destroyed. We will do nothing to stop that. We will acquiesce to every ludicrous measure that's put forth. And so we have shown ourselves to be basically a completely conquerable people. So that's my takeaway from this. As far as the actual virus, I don't care. I mean, if I get it, if I've had it, if I die from it, I don't care. What I care about is that basically we've shown the most evil people that have probably ever been in power in the history of the world that we will do whatever they want us to do. And that, I think, is the darkest thing I've ever learned in my life.
Yeah, it's interesting, Dee, because as you know, I've been working on foundations of rhetoric, looking into the persuasion literature. They talk about these things like social proof, right? Or about how people respond to authority. Like you could just put a white coat on and tell people to do things and they'll kind of follow your orders type thing. They picked a number like 20, 30 different hospitals, and they put an anonymous man called a nurse, people, nurses who are working on the floor, and said, "Oh, I'm a physician, and I want you to give the following doses to the patient." The dose, one, they made up the drug, so the drug didn't exist, and two, the dose was obviously like dangerously excessive. What do you think the compliance rate? And bear in mind now, this is a physician that they don't know. It's just a voice on the phone saying, "I'm a physician, I want you to do this." The compliance rate of nurses was 95%. 95% of nurses did not do any basic checks whatsoever before just following the orders.
If you think about it, though, from the moment you went to school, you're kind of conditioned to immediately accept authority. And this is the society it's creating. If you think about it now, the way, especially when I was in school, the idea of self-responsibility is not something that really is highlighted as much as you think as it should be.
The problem is that people, they don't challenge anymore. When I was a young man, if you didn't challenge, you weren't respected.
Shinobi, the darkest thing I found, though, this is what I'm trying to get at, though. They find that the number of people in society who are what they call imitators seems to be very, very high. There are 5% of people who are what they call initiators, people who are prepared to challenge the status quo, not care about things like social proof, go against the grain, speak out. Those sorts of people probably find themselves fired these days. The number of people who are prepared to go against the herd is vanishingly small.
There's a lot to be said for it, because they've done studies whereby, for instance, if one person stands up, then other people tend to stand up. You know what I mean? Yeah. They will follow the crowd.
About a third of people are so NPC that their mind is warped by the herd.
Thanks for your help.
Oh! The timing! What? The goddamn timing!
Why was that so perfect? That was God. Thank you, whoever did that. That was amazing. Right now, I'm playing Napoleon Total War. Unmodded at the moment, I'm still doing vanilla. And actually, me and Liz have played together multiple times on single player with and without NPCs as the CPU characters. It's a fun game. It's definitely involved, though. I got Attila. I don't like that as much. I don't know whether I'll bother playing that one. People said it was better, but I don't know. The design of the actual use of your troops in the context of battle, I think I like Napoleon Total War better. And also the crack of black powder. Isn't that like the most satisfying fucking sound ever? It's way better than anything that you get in the medieval era. That particular sound is highly aesthetic. It's like Civil War battles are great. 100,000 people die, but it's candy to the ears.
The public have very short memories, and the thing is, when the next health scare comes along, they still believe the same scientists.
What I can't understand in this case, though, Shinobi, right, is that it was literally on a dime. It was literally like 1 week the orthodoxy was this, the next week the orthodoxy was 180%. Like it was 100% the opposite of what they were saying last week. And now the science has changed. Oh, the science has changed.
Scientists are like wildebeest. The herd will change and they'll be going off in the opposite direction.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
that's what happens.
Yeah, look back at the American response to this. Look at those press conferences with who's that little gnome, Fauci, and that woman with the scarves, and I mean they literally told people don't wear masks. Masks don't, masks. If anything, they're harmful in casual general use. Yeah. The WHO said the same thing. Don't wear masks. They do more harm than good. And now it's a fucking religion. I mean, if you go on Twitter, you can find these accounts, usually women, by the way, who seem to have a fetish for masks. Like they have wear a mask in their username. Like they have a proud picture of their fat faces with a nappy strapped over the gobs. I mean, and again, it's been spectacularly successful. No one remembers just a year ago when they said, don't wear masks. Don't wear masks.
Sometimes I have a nephew, and I share talks with him, and I speak to him a little bit. I try to undermine the conformity that gets imposed on folks like that in the public school system. I said, hey, the company that builds your school, if you look around at the architecture of it, it's the same company that builds the prison, and they look exactly the same. They work the same way. There's a little positions
of quasi-authority over us, and they've learned to exploit this.
I was going to say, Dee, that I mean, if you're going to be uber cynical, I saw that the cathedral, what we call the cathedral, or the system, or whatever you want to call it, was rapidly losing authority and trust before the pandemic happened. You'd say that is true, right? It was like they looked like they were on the way out, and they were losing on all fronts, it seemed to me. In America as well, because Trump, whatever you want to say about him, he seemed to be doing all right, in 2019 going into 2020, and people were also stopping listening to the media and stopping listening to experts, because they were increasingly pushing radical agendas, whether it was climate stuff or whether it was woke stuff. So they were like, well, what figures are absolutely trusted? And I think science and doctors was that area. It was like, right, we can get them back through this. We can use that.
Yeah, and
that. You see,
that's exactly what they did. I mean, why do you think all the vectors of attack have turn towards scientism? I mean, look at the climate change, which is of course there's slightly less adherence to expert opinion, quote expert opinion on that, but it's still, again, they chose a vector with our new priest class that could come and say completely absurd things without any ostensible proof or evidence, or with very muddled proof or evidence, and people would naturally believe them. I mean, I think that what you say is absolutely true, and I think that the powers that be have certainly understood that. what is the attack vector that is most psychologically effective? In the past, it could have been the church, or a noble authority. But of course, those institutions were eroded and have been eroded over time. And so, where do they turn? Where do they find this priest class? Well, it is in scientists, And sadly, I of course, there was certainly a time up till fairly recently where I was susceptible to this as well. I mean, I was certainly quite skeptical on certain things, climate science being one of them. But I was also susceptible to this idea that, well, if nothing else, science is at least one of the more trustworthy areas left in our civilization. And of course, in the past year, that scales have fallen from my eyes, and that's completely gone away. I no longer trust institutional science either. Doesn't mean that I've lost trust in the method of science, but that isn't what we're talking about, when we talk about capital S science.
But yeah, I saw the news of Trump being acquitted. Yay! Like, who's surprised, though? Like, we're not surprised, are we?
I get this lecture every day.
You keep eating carbs every day. Don't blame me.
Like, okay, what was it? Like, yesterday, I came in with a potato, and you were just like, oh, it smells really good. And then he went over to, like, the pull bar, started pulling himself up. Yeah. And it's literally like John the Savage whipping himself, going, strumpet, strumpet.
Yes, I did go and do some pull-ups, or some dips, or whatever it was, out of a sense of chastisement, because I was being tempted by your sinful food. Thank you very much.
Yeah, start ordering pizzas to the office. I'm not going to eat them. Just going to have them lying around.
I'm not going to be happy about that.
Do you understand? We're sat here, 2 years ago, people were sat on UO talking about, the viscosity of ketchup, and now we're sitting here talking about, what proportion are going to, accept what dose of what experimental mRNA therapy, to get on that path to freedom. I mean, if you sit and look back and sort of step back and look at this, it is so dark, and yet we've normalized this. We should not be having this type of discussion. This is mental. I mean, just step back and look at what's being said, and think about what you would have felt if this had been imposed all of a sudden just a few years ago, and you will see that it is completely evil and mental.
Here's one thing to think about, is that tyranny, like vampires, has to be invited in. If you want to introduce a tyranny, you have to get people to invite you in. Yeah. And you try all sorts of strategies.
Well, because what we are is we are a health service with a nation attached to it.
Now, currently, yeah, definitely.
That is what we've become. I mean, think about the rallying over the past year. Did we rally behind the Queen? Did we rally behind the monarchy? Did we rally behind God and Britain? No, we rallied behind the NHS. We rallied behind a health service. The entire raison d'etre of our lives, of our ancient heritage, is to support this massive fucking health service.
From people who have been watching the podcast and leaving us comments to tell us about this, who have been following the Matt Gaetz case, have said basically he's an effective conservative. He can put the Republican case forward stridently and in direct opposition to the left-wing case in order to refute it, and therefore they're screaming, pulling their hair out and be like, right, we've got to get rid of this guy.
So that's... Which
explains why Politico described Matt Gaetz's victim as, quote, a former minor, as in formerly a child. But I mean, apparently they went on some cruise or something, and she was 18 when she went. So it's like, right, so she's an adult when she was in contact with him.
But she previously had been a child.
She had previously been a child.
Right.
Matt Gaetz, confirmed villain.
Yeah, that's a pretty weird accusation.
Aren't you like former child labour then, by that standard?
I suppose so, yeah, I am.
I mean, I am as well, I guess. But
well, you're
who isn't?
You're a former child boss, I suppose.
I suppose so, yeah. God.
Bristol riot, okay? Now, there have been many Bristol riots in the history of this country. Famously, in the 19th century, there was one. And,
there's even a Wikipedia on it. There's so many.
I think during Thatcher's years, there was couple of Bristol riots, and here's the latest in a long line
So-
in a proud tradition of rioting in Bristol.
I've
the
got a
original
I've got a
home.
little
Yeah.
I've got a little presentation on this.
Right.
Surprise! It's in one of the most
Let me-
bougie cities in the UK.
So
here we go.
I happened to live in Bristol for 4 years, and and also being a planner, we happened to cover a lot of the demographic stuff to do with Bristol and many of these areas, and I happened to live also on Gloucester Road, right next to Stokescroft, which is which anyone who is from Bristol will know is very pertinent to these riots. I just want to say as well, before I preface this by saying Bristol in general is a very nice place. I just want to preface that I really enjoy my time there. But anyway, what I think is important to kind of understand with these riots and why there's so many riots in Bristol, right? Well, so much of this discourse is because Bristol, I think it's almost a planning issue as much as there's some other things. So I've got a map here so you got your demographics in terms of your incomes, kind of simplified down into better off, middle income, and less well off. And then you've got your political kind of areas here. You see how they line up. But what's important, I think, to note is this is the centre of the city down here. You're getting a massive convergence between the kind of better off Bristol and low income Bristol, right? And these people in Lawrence Hill and Ashley are massively against gentrification, hugely against it. And so they form their own groups around this to try and prevent this. And this eventually spills out into other social activism. So Stokescroft and Gloucester Road, right? Massive low-income area, massively student, probably one of the biggest student areas in the country, because you've got both students of UE there, and you've got UOB students there, and then you get a lot of hippies as well, and any type of progressive you can think of, to the point where Stokescroft itself has its own organisation called the People's Republic of Stokescroft, which does have a website, ladies and gents, if you want to know what goes on in this area. And it really is what you can consider a progressive area. And I'm telling you, this is a forewarning as well. If there is to be a Chaz in the UK, this is where it's probably going to be. And so they even have a school of activism. Just to let you know, and I've done a bit of work here telling you about. So there's so many riots. There is literally a Wikipedia about it, right? And there was even right in 2011. And I think it comes into the same line. I think of where we are now. There's even riots against Tesco moving into that area. They're so anti-consumer. They're so anti-everything. They had a riot. They had a Tesco riot, more or less.
Well, where do Bristol people go shopping?
This is Stokescroft. It's its own really. It's basically its own. It functions in its own kind of isolated bubble of kind of cultural expression. It's known as a conservation area for graffiti, more or less. It really is. And so what you got to realize then, I've got a map, notable map here. So this is what you got. You got this student area here, and then down here you've got all your. This is if we look at the political map, it's greens. So you got your middle class left wingers with your lower class student communists, right? And a conversion there. So basically, this area sets up the activism. And this area comes over to fund it, and the police station is literally only there, and it's within walking distance, about 10-minute walking distance. So it's really easy to protest in Bristol, and there's so many pedestrian areas everywhere. The roads are fairly wide, and it's so easy to organize as well within Bristol because it's such a dense city and so easy to go around. So I think there's a compile of issues why Bristol is like the way it is, and the Colston statue down here then going into the harbour side. So it's so much it's so studenty. So those issues come in really quickly through the students, and then they go out into kind of these things like the People's Republic of Stokescroft and stuff. And so what you get then, you have also the Lawrence Hill area, which is really a high density of ethnic minorities, and I imagine BLM has quite a large presence there. So yeah, but an interesting thing to note about Bristol is when people talk about autonomous zone in the UK, right? It's already had one for years, more or less. There's this area known as the Bear Pit, which has had this mini kind of like squatters area, which has basically functioned as its own autonomous zone for years. That's being gentrified and being taken away. So it's a bit of a powder keg, Bristol, and this is why you're probably seeing so much coming out of it, because there's so much friction between the two.
So the way to attack them is to like almost deploy Starbucks as tactical nukes. We'll drop a Pret in there, and that will gentrify the area.
Yep. Definitely. Well, you think about this area here has been entirely gentrified. You've got Cabot Circus here now, which is probably one of the more prime shopping areas in the country, right on the edge of this here. And what they want to do, they want to extend the gentrification up here. This has all been gentrified as well.
Help those squatters with avocado wraps.
Mm-hmm. It honestly is. It's just friction, and this area here then is kind of resisting it. And then they've taken it upon themselves to form these activist fronts, basically. And then they're bringing in, obviously, other things just to kick off.
This is kind of a weird situation now that you've laid it out like this. Very interesting presentation, by the way, Owen. Top marks for you, young boy.
Thank you.
But it's kind of interesting though, because in a way, you think, well, there is a kind of anti-neoliberal, anti-globo homo thing kind of baked into this. I mean, probably these leftists are complete scum. But I kind of understand, like, they're, in a way, trying to keep out Starbucks and trying to keep out that is laudable.
So in Bristol, right, there's a massive laissez-faire undercurrent. It's a very laissez-faire city in terms of the way they want to go things. So I do have some sympathies with these people here, because they want to create a kind of cultural quarter which is entirely kind of laissez-faire, and it's sprung up from their own kind of area, and they don't want corporations coming in and on their turf. Like you said, I kind of in some ways respect that, but what they're doing is they're ruining the rest of the city now. They're breaking out of Stokes Croft into other areas of the city, and because they're parts of the city which are really, really nice places, and they're really high income, because Bristol is, like I said, it's really dense, but it's really divided in a really small scale. So you can walk, because you can basically walk from one end to the other end of the city quite in not that much time, but you go through so many different kinds of areas.
Can I just ask though? They're keeping out the Pret and the Marks and Spencers.
Mm-hmm.
But what is the indigenous Bristol institution like? Well, what are they putting up instead? Because I can imagine the worst sort of vegan canteen being erected by these people.
You get your organic cafes and stuff like, and you get your vegan restaurants and stuff. But you also, to be fair to them, you do get some proper pubs. They do build proper pubs. They have a really kind of more of a traditional nightlife. They have a lot of small. They do things like that. They do have some form, but it's all within the kind of Marxist working class sort of proletariat sort of mold. It's like, oh, this is the traditional proletariat sort of thing going on. That's kind of where it comes from. But you do have then, it is a cultural quarter. So they do, like, obviously they have like Jamaican barbecue as well, which is quite interesting. And you have some other things like that. But yeah, Stokes Croft is a mad location to be in, because it does feel lawless. It feels like it's a law to its own, in the sense that people will openly do drugs on the street. There's a place called Blue Mountain, a nightclub there, which literally I was told once had a queue for a urinal for cocaine. So and with the bouncers were bouncing the queue on that. Apparently, it is honestly it's a wild place, and my worry is it is spreading into the rest of Bristol, because they're just so angry. And then
what are they angry about?
It's because, well, they've been told all these things about, that they got angry about, because Bristol, this area, Bristol itself tends to be probably Lib Dem if it was in neutral, is very pro EU. It's also though the second richest city out of London.
So it's basically neo-lib versus socialist then playing out.
Yeah, it is.
Right.
Because the house prices in Bristol are high, only second to London. It's that high. It's doing really well economically.
Anyway, carry on, Owen. Carry on.
So yeah, like I haven't got much left now, but I'm just gonna say now. So what I'm trying to say in kind of short is yeah, there are other factors in this which are motivating these, and then you've got obviously the backdrop of the virus then and everything like that, and there's an attitude in Bristol that is really fomenting this, and kind of what I wanted then is on Bristol's side by saying it not all Bristol. I really like this area down here. This area like this year is a renovated Georgian Square, which was a really big project by, believe it or not, New Labour to restore Georgian Square that had been destroyed. And you got Clifton as well, which is a really nice place to be and stuff like that. But what the thing is, there's a really bad kind of out of sight, out of mind thing going on, and it really does. And then you do have all these different community groups that really are kind of infiltrated with all these different things. Because I was there when, and you have a massive Antifa presence in Bristol, huge. Like you have there was when I was in my university freshers day, they had like 3 different Marxist organisations at the freshers fair, and I was there when Mog was confronted by Antifa, and and it's really well organised in Bristol. And I gotta go back to finish off my point. It is honestly probably the perfect city to argue in. You won't get it in Liverpool as such because the way the city is shaped geographically, because the population isn't too much in the centre. Bristol is very much, the population is focused in the centre, and same in Manchester and certain areas of London. That's why in London it's kind of restricted to certain neighbourhoods. But in Bristol, because the population's in the centre, you get more of this destruction and stuff like that. And like say, for example, the Colston one. The Colston one's been a debate for years and years and years. We even debated it in uni. Obviously, you can see what side I fell on. And there was the debate about the naming of the theatre. That was another one. And all of this is really big in the consciousness of Bristol, and these issues are brought to the fore by the press in Bristol and by the graffiti as well. Because anywhere you go in certain areas of Bristol, they really do throw it in your face, because it is it's particularly in this area here mainly. They'll have like on the sign, there's a sign on the motorway here which is about veganism, which is over the top of the gate, basically the gateway. The Bristol's a big vegan sign, and then you come to the Bear Pit then, which will have usually an activist placard, and then you got this building up here. There it is, this building here, it says hashtag community across it, and they'll usually have on the bottom here a bunch of graffiti that kind of is meant to tell a kind of activist story. Usually, like last time I remember I walked down, it was about the NHS, stuff like that. And then you've got all this different kind of graffiti, which is about black empowerment and stuff like that. So it's been in these areas for a very long time, and it's been fermenting in these areas for a very long time. But it was confined to them, and now it isn't. And that's what I'm kind of thinking about, what's happened to push them out.
Well, I would say that in general that kind of muddle-headed student politics mindset has basically kind of taken over a lot of the world. I mean, not just Bristol or even the UK, but you see it everywhere now.
Writing in USA Today, Armour accused the quarterback of having unchecked and unadmitted white privilege. Oh my, there it is. White privilege. Ding, 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 ding.
Monty says, do you wear the flower-covered exemption lanyard to avoid wearing a mask in your posh area? What's the flower-covered exemption lanyard? What's that?
So you can apply to the NHS for an exemption lanyard if you have an exemption for wearing a mask.
No, I wear the mask when I go out.
I've never worn a mask except to go to medical appointment. But no, I've never worn it, and no one has ever questioned me.
They won't serve you in most places if you don't wear a mask.
Mm-hmm. That's not true. No, I've been going. I mean, I don't know if they're around here, but I see people in the supermarkets without masks.
Yeah,
I try not to look at them. I don't want them to think that I think that they're a dick. I secretly think they're a hero, but
yeah, I've gone to the shops.
That's the criticism of the people making the film. So, like, it's just sorry, dude. I'm sorry that you're too black, but not black enough.
I love the comments as well. Like Idris Elba, white, says the BBC.
That's literally her position. Yeah. If he just was eating that fried chicken with a bone through his nose, he'd have been fine, but no, white, get out.
Jesus Christ.
It's so awful.
Yeah.
Anyway,
speaking of racism.
What the left done now?
Phrenologically, AA, what do you think of the woman on the left there? Trustworthy?
Yeah, I mean, I've been checking out their noses, and I'm not sure what to make of a nose that's just a kind of line like this. I mean, it's a very odd.
What about that forehead, though?
Yeah, with a very, very receding hairline.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that's probably the head shape of an imbecile, according to the phrenology. You know, dishonest chin, of course. All right, shall we move on?
Firehaps, curious. Did you guys go through the typical character arc of being leftists and getting red-pilled, or have your politics always been what they are?
As long as I was politically active, I was more conservative. I would say I've definitely gone through a journey more from libertarian to Goldwater conservative kind of thing. But that happened pretty quickly. I've been there.
And there'll be people walking around all
my God!
America with flames coming out of their butthole. And everyone who takes it up the rear, everyone who has a penis injected in his butthole, when that penis comes out, the flame will start burning.
No!
Ain't nobody gonna stick no penis in that flame. That flame will be an eternal flame coming out of the butthole of every sodomite. And nobody will ever stick a penis in your butthole again because it will be on fire.
Damn.